Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to picture this. When you walk through the gates of a modern zoo, what do you see? You probably see a park with sturdy fences, some amazing exotic animals, and nicely manicured walking paths, right? Well, actually, that is just the tip of the iceberg. What you're really walking into is a massive, industrial-scale, climate-controlled facility. Today, we're totally tearing down that familiar facade to uncover the hidden engineering, the intense daily logistics, and the honestly surprising economic realities that keep these incredible places running. It's a wild ride, so let's dive right in.
Seriously, think about what it actually takes to maintain a literal slice of the tropical rainforest right in the middle of a freezing New England winter. This isn't just landscaping, this is what we call life support systems engineering. We're talking about industrial-scale HVAC systems, immense water filtration networks, and environmental control systems, or ECS, that literally have to operate flawlessly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what does it truly cost to maintain the wild in a temperate climate? Let's peel back the layers and look at the sheer financial and logistical weight of this massive undertaking.
The first thing we absolutely have to do is shatter a very common illusion. For decades, the public assumption has been that zoos operate on a pretty simple business model, right? You sell tickets at the gate, you feed the animals, and you make a profit. But the reality of a modern, accredited zoological facility couldn't be further from that. It is all about high-stakes, active complexity management. Survival for these institutions isn't about ticket margins at all. It's about managing an incredibly volatile mix of living creatures, highly specialized infrastructure, and immense legal liability.
195 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the number of annual visitors to zoos and aquariums accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, or the AZA. To put that massive number into perspective, that's more annual attendance than the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and Major League Baseball combined. No way, right? But this staggering volume of foot traffic actually acts as a smokescreen. It masks the massive, invisible infrastructure working away beneath the surface. With that many people walking through the gates every day, the logistical challenges happening behind the scenes are just mind-boggling.
And that staggering scale extends right into their daily operations, starting with the exotic supply chain. Because obviously, you can't just order specialized animal diets from a standard food distributor. Zoos have to source highly specific, often incredibly perishable feed. They have to maintain strict cold chains just to keep specialized medications viable. And then, of course, there's the ultimate logistical challenge: safely moving the wild animals themselves across the globe.
Moving an animal is not like shipping an Amazon package. It requires a highly specialized aviation network. Aviation specialists like Airbridge Cargo have to rely on really strict certifications, like the CEIV Live Animal Standard, just to handle this stuff. They use tailored unit load devices, or ULDs, which are designed specifically for the secure, climate-controlled transport of living cargo. Because whether you are moving a 500-pound silverback gorilla, a beluga whale, or even a fragile red siskin bird, the transport environment has to be perfectly, and I mean perfectly, calibrated.
So how are these incredibly delicate transports actually executed? First up, airlines have to set incredibly specific hold temperatures depending entirely on the species. Second, they deploy highly specialized equipment like shallow-angle ramps to load animals, think competition horses or large mammals, to minimize any risk of physical injury. But step 3 is absolutely the most crucial: mitigating all animal stress. In live transportation, avoiding stress isn't just some nice-to-have preference. It is literally the single greatest operational mandate to ensure the animal survives the journey safely.
Okay, so once the animal safely arrives at the zoo, you'd think the hard part is over, right? Actually, the complexity only increases. Welcome to the world of high-stakes habitat engineering. Think about it this way. In traditional construction work, you build structures that are designed to stay put and withstand the weather. But in a zoo, you are building structures that are actively being stressed by their occupants. It's a completely unique engineering challenge where the user, the animal, is constantly testing, scratching, leaning on, or actively trying to break the system.
And the financial reality of engineering that kind of containment is really eye-opening. When we look at actual financial statements from Zoo New England, we start to see the staggering difference between variable costs, like feeding the animals, and the massive fixed costs of capital assets. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in historical costs and over $30 million in accumulated depreciation alone. This isn't just about throwing up a chain-link fence. This is the staggering life cycle cost of constructing and maintaining active, stress structures that require continuous repair and specialized environmental controls for decades.
Now, if you're still assuming that ticket sales alone are driving this economic engine, these numbers tell a completely different story. In their 2025 financials, Zoo New England reported roughly $14.4 million in operating revenues. That's things like gate admissions, which saw over 1 million visitors, and event revenues like Boston Lights. But their operating expenses, a massive $31.2 million. So yeah, there is an enormous financial gap between what it costs to simply run the facility and what visitors are actually paying at the gate.
To really understand where all that capital goes, just look at their upcoming African Experience project. This is a $19 million investment designed to seamlessly integrate a penguin coast and an African savanna habitat right in the middle of the New England climate. Try to imagine the hidden infrastructure here, the plumbing, the massive heating systems for the savanna animals, and the incredibly advanced environmental control systems required to continuously chill and filter water for African penguins. It's a prime example of the massive capital required to safely and sustainably house exotic species today.
But capital construction costs and daily animal care aren't the only massive expenses. Lurking in the background is what we can call the hidden killer of zoo economics: extreme liability. Because the primary driver of operational risk in these places is human-animal contact, liability mitigation is quite literally everything. Every single habitat must be heavily engineered to prevent escape, and every single interaction must have an unbreakable fallback safety protocol. This is essentially high-stakes safety engineering.
And all these legal requirements translate directly into heavy financial burdens. Under frameworks like the Zoo Licensing Act, facilities are legally mandated to prevent escapes, provide suitable accommodation, and maintain incredibly strict pest control. So, to mitigate these risks, zoos are forced to carry comprehensive, highly specialized insurance portfolios. We're talking massive public liability insurance, animal transit insurance, and even animal mortality insurance for rare species. It's wild, but if a zoo loses its insurance coverage, it risks losing its operating license entirely. On top of all that, the risk landscape is evolving rapidly, which is actively driving those insurance premiums through the roof. Today, brokers and zoo managers have to account for emerging hazards that literally nobody was thinking about 20 years ago. Climate-driven flooding is making basic property insurance so much more expensive. Disease outbreaks like the avian flu require rapid quarantine protocols and specialized coverage. And surprisingly enough, because modern zoos are now heavily reliant on AI-driven health monitoring and digital ticketing, they are suddenly vulnerable to AI-driven cyber attacks. These can disrupt operations and lead to massive data breaches. So let's recap. If operating expenses are double the operating revenue and liability and insurance costs are absolutely skyrocketing, how in the world do modern zoos actually survive? Well, this brings us to the massive paradigm shift that actually keeps the gates open, the conservation economic engine. You see, the modern zoo's economic model is no longer ticket sales equal profit. It is research and conservation status equals funding, which equals survival. Today, zoos rely incredibly heavily on state appropriations, massive private fundraising, and grants that are directly tied to their status as conservation leaders, not just entertainment venues.
And the scale of this conservation work, it is awe-inspiring. $231 million. That is how much is invested annually into global field conservation by AZA-accredited facilities, benefiting nearly 1,000 different species across 127 countries. Through incredibly complex programs like the Species Survival Plan, or SSP, these institutions coordinate breeding and genetics globally. They are effectively transforming themselves from local parks into global gene banks and massive conservation powerhouses.
I love this quote from the AZA report because the overarching goal here is beautifully simple. There is enormous opportunity to connect people to nature and engage them as agents of change. Zoos leverage those 195 million visitors we talked about earlier to fund incredible initiatives. Take Zoo New England's Hatch program, for example, which engages thousands of local students to raise and release threatened turtles, or their global partnerships protecting the critically endangered African penguin and Venezuelan red siskins. The visitors coming through the gates are the catalyst for a massive environmental advocacy machine. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. Are modern zoos really just simple entertainment venues for a fun weekend outing? Or are they high-tech, heavily engineered conservation arcs that are absolutely essential for global species survival? So the next time you visit a zoo, try to look past the animals for just a moment. Look at the massive life support systems. Consider that complex global supply chain, and remember the invisible architecture working tirelessly to keep the wild alive. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking the big questions.